right, well, it looks like the doors are closed, and so I'll go ahead and wait for people to get settled for a second, and then go ahead and start with my presentation here because I'm not at all nervous and totally ready to do this. All right, hey there, GDC Assassins. I'm Gabe Graziani, 1/4 of your community team on Assassin's Creed. And I'm here today to talk to you about building a community of exceptionally passionate and creative players. And before I begin, I would like to mention that there are going to be some evaluations emailed to you during the session. So if you could go ahead and be ruthless and brutal in your feedback, I would really appreciate it. Now, before I begin, I need to apologize to you all for the sort of BuzzFeedy, Upworthy headline, and specifically the description of this talk. But I really wanted to get noticed by GDC this year, and it seemed to work. So I figured I would go ahead and put in like 27 community tactics the PR fat cats don't want you to know about. So yeah, it turns out it worked, so here I am. But of course at Ubisoft, I'm fortunate enough to work with one of the greatest PR teams in the business, and I'd be remiss if I didn't call out the work of Stone Chin and Chris Norris. Specifically, I couldn't do a lot of the things that I've been able to do at the company without their help and support, and I owe them a lot for participating in the Assassin's Creed community. And making it one of the most welcoming and flat-out prolific communities in gaming today. I'm privileged to work with these gentlemen. Now, a little bit about me. I studied film and animation at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco, which is just down the street, and at Fisherman's Wharf, and over on Van Ness, and you know how these guys are. It's basically all over the city. And then, after several years and no degree later, I got a job at GamePro magazine as a graphic designer, and moved into editorial as a writer and game critic for Games Radar and later GameSpy. And man, being a games journalist was like a dream come true. Like, the work was like a dream come true. The pay and the hours, not so much. So I started looking around to see if I could do something at a game studio. And this was around 2008, so I tried to look for a company who made games that I really liked. And because it was 2008, I just finished Prince of Persia. If you can find any of my reviews for Rainbow Six Vegas, you'll know that I loved both 1 and 2. So Ubisoft Montreal was a natural fit, and the best thing about that too was I had some friends who worked there and, were able to submit my resume for me. And, they are opening up a new, weird community development department that I wasn't super familiar with, but I had always been active on the forums at all the outlets that I worked at. And part of the reason I mentioned my history is because I wanted to make sure that you guys understand the skill set that I was arriving to the job with, right? So I had a bunch of history in film and animation, and then while I was in editorial, which involved a lot of writing, we also did some podcasts and things like that. So I was very AV, multimedia focused. So the outline for the GDC presentation says that I need to keep the introduction short, but so much of what I've learned about working in community tracks right alongside my career progress. So what I'm going to do is basically continue with my career a little bit and give you an insight on what I learned along the way about creating a passionate community. So when I started, I didn't have a Facebook account, I didn't have a Twitter account, I didn't understand how any of that stuff worked. And what you need to understand is that this was just a week shy of 6 years ago. So a lot of the brands that at the time weren't super active on those channels. It wasn't a thing that companies did. So when I arrived, there really wasn't a very obvious plan for how you were supposed to approach this kind of a job. So I looked, though, to a couple of people who I thought were already doing a really good job, and that would be Larry Herb, whom some of you may know as Major Nelson at Xbox, and then also Ryan Bowling, who at the time was IM420, the community manager and creative strategist for Call of Duty. So looking at these guys, what I noticed first and foremost about them was that they were super present in their communities. They were always available, and they were virtually everywhere. Especially like when I was a game journalist and I was managing the Xbox part of the page for Games Radar, Major Nelson's blog was the first place I hit up every morning because that's always where I got all my news. So the key learning there was I needed to be available to my fans. So of course, at that point, I made a Facebook account and Twitter account and started tweeting and Facebooking and doing all that good stuff. So when I started on Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, which was the first Assassin's Creed game that I worked on, we were looking to do a similar kind of thing. We were looking to do something to provide presence. And since we were still struggling with demonstrable ROI, we knew that we had to do it cheap, which is, I think for community managers, some of you are probably struggling with this yourself. We look for a way to justify the expenditures that we do in order to have these good feelings or positive sentiment in the community, but it's really challenging to measure those things. So when we started, we kind of copped out and we're just like, well, we don't cost anything. So, it's basically free. And you get this stuff that maybe is valuable, maybe it isn't, but hey, it's free. So we started doing YouTube Q&As, and we did those with just a camera and two of us in the studio. Basically, we'd ask our community to submit questions via our social channels, and then we'd respond in a short YouTube video. The key thing for these was that we were constantly refining our approach and asking for feedback, not just on the game, but on the actual delivery system, how we were communicating with them. We wanted to know from our community how we could service them the best. So there were a couple of key factors to the success of these that got our community off to a really positive start, right when it was really starting to grow, because at the time that I came on to Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, we were at roughly, I think, 160,000 Facebook fans. Today, the Assassin's Creed Facebook page is a global page with, I think, 10.1 million fans on it. But the key success factors for the YouTube Q&As were that, one, it was a concrete demonstration of presence. Because we gave them a personality to interact with, there was a sense of contact and familiarity. And this was something that we noticed about YouTube in general at the time. There was a methodology at work for the more popular YouTubers, and one of the things that we noticed they did a lot was interact with their community. So by answering the questions that we received, we were directly interacting with our community. And the second thing that contributed to the success of those was something you might be familiar with called Senpai Noticed Me. By calling out social media identities of fans directly on the YouTube videos, either their Twitter account names or YouTube handles, whatever it was, we were acknowledging individual players in a very meaningful and public way. Within our growing community, it became something of a badge of honor to get your questions answered, especially as the program picked up and we started getting more and more YouTube views on the videos themselves, which at the time it was I think 30,000 views, 30 to 60,000 views. We were like, oh man, this is amazing. Now it doesn't seem like a whole lot for us, but at the time it was something that we were hitting. We'd never done anything like that consistently, so it was super exciting for us. So also at that time, user-generated content was basically taking over. I had done a study over the summer, specifically for Ubisoft, where I examined Bungie's Halo Reach beta. And at the time they had, this was before Waypoint, so they just had the Bungie blog. And I was going over their blog and noticed that 80% of the content that they put on the blog was user-generated YouTube videos. So it was clear that, and the key learning from that for me too was that they weren't afraid of showing videos where people were making fun of them or showing bugs or doing anything like that. They just put any content that they found entertaining would go up on the blog. So user-generated content became super essential when we got to post-launch because, as many of you are probably aware, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood was the first of the series to include multiplayer. And that meant that we needed to give it a lot more post-launch attention. And the multiplayer for Brotherhood was kind of complicated in terms that it was both different from the main Assassin's Creed game, but it was also different from a lot of multiplayers at the time. So people really wanted, there was a feeling in the studio that they wanted us to produce some video content because we'd just done such great work with these Q&As. They're like, hey, why don't you make some tutorials for the multiplayer? The problem with that was that I was terrible at it. So like, it had been like 3 weeks, and I had done game capture and written scripts and done all this stuff, and I still didn't have a finished video tutorial. And it was starting to get super frustrating. And right at a time when, if we didn't deliver something, it was going to lose relevance to our players, right? We were losing players like on a daily basis because they didn't understand what was going on. So at this point, I want to rewind for a second, because we've been doing a thing that had been kind of simmering in the background this entire time, but it was about to become a lot more important. So when I started, I took over for a gentleman named Amar Azazia, who was a really talented community developer, but is now the brand content director for the entire Assassin's Creed brand. So clearly a multi-talented individual. Anyway, he'd started a feature on our website called Our Fans Got Talent. So like I said, an amazing visionary, but maybe not the best at naming things. Our Fans Got Talent was a simple UGC recognition program where we'd highlight a piece of art from our community every month or so, and then do a little interview or something. So in focusing on the YouTube Q&As, though, we'd kind of let that slide, and we stopped doing them as frequently as we used to. But with the YouTube community becoming more productive, and we started seeing more videos coming out, this was about to get super, super important. So we relaunched the program with a new name called Fan Appreciation Friday, because I love alliteration. So Amar had also pointed out one fan in particular who I'd started working with more closely, and his name was Escoblades. He was a nice guy, and we chatted often on Twitter, and he was becoming more active as a blogger, and invited our team onto podcasts that he ran. So he was starting to run community podcasts and things like that. But most importantly, he was making gameplay videos of our multiplayer. And he was really good at it. He had an amazing voice, and I don't just mean his actual physical voice, but his presence on camera. He was really nice and really inviting, and really good at highlighting the different elements of the game. So we reached out to him and some of his peers like Loomer and Squiddish, and we asked if it would be all right to highlight their videos on the Facebook page. Now, I'd felt a little weird about it at the time because I didn't believe in paying people in exposure. If someone does work for you, you pay them for that work, right? So this relationship was problematic for me. I really didn't want to take advantage of our most dedicated and prolific community members in that kind of way. It seemed opposite to the kind of philosophy that we were going for. So I tried to be really honest with them about what we were doing and the way we were going to work together. But among our YouTube community, the response, by and large, was that I was just being a crazy person. Because even though we weren't actually paying them, they were getting more views. And after a couple of months, many of them actually got picked up by different MCMs. Escoblades got picked up by Machinima, and that's a paying gig for him. So by us featuring them on the Facebook page, it meant more views for them. By us sending out tweets and interacting with them, it meant more views for them. And more views for them was CPM for them. And that meant that they were starting to make more money off of their videos. It also was good because it raised their status in their MCN, right, their multi-channel network. So I could sleep soundly at night with that relationship. Around the same time, we had another art form start appearing more frequently in our Fan Appreciation Friday features, and that was cosplay. Now, when I was a game critic, a video producer friend of mine and I wanted to produce this sort of documentary about this crazy new thing called cosplay, but it was just too weird. Over the years, though, that I've been working in the community, it started becoming more and more mainstream. And the developers loved it. I think part of the reason for that is that there's something super, super satisfying for creative people when they see the thing that they've created cause more creativity in the world. It's sort of it's a beautiful synergy, right, and a virtuous cycle in the truest sense of the word. So they were always super excited to see any cosplay that we have, and the demand came predominantly from the dev team. But then when we would post these images up as Fan Appreciation Friday images, they would tend to get a lot of feedback and a lot of engagement. So I started to reach out more to individual cosplayers, doing short-form interviews with them and stuff for the website. And I was learning a lot about the amount of effort that went into their craft, but also how things weren't always emotionally safe for cosplayers on the internet. They were considered by many to be attention mongers, like people who are just in it for attention, which is something that I always think is, I mean, it's a very common thread on the internet to denigrate people for craving attention, but the fact of the matter is that it's something that we all want, right? Like all people want some degree of attention. So from our perspective, there's nothing wrong with the pursuit of that. So we tried to keep, knowing those things in talking to cosplayers, we realized that we needed to keep a very close eye on moderation. Whenever we posted a cosplayer's photo, we always tried to be sure that we were there and present in the comment section, and very aware if we needed to delete comments or edit comments or something like that. And at that point, we had a pretty manageable traffic level, because we were, I think, something like 480,000 fans on the AC Facebook page at the time, and so when we'd post a cosplay photo, we could basically deal with it. So cosplay was becoming bigger. We wanted to do a big event for cosplay to take advantage of the new trend. So we decided to do a contest on our Facebook page right after the announcement of Assassin's Creed Revelations. So we set up a submission mechanic with an email address and a list of information for people to provide us with their photos and stuff, and we drafted up some legal rules, and it was the biggest mistake of my career. See, we didn't include anything in the legal rules that gave us a way to omit any of the submissions. So that meant that every submission that we got had to face the wrath of an extraordinarily critical and ruthless internet. So when we started getting submissions, there were some we knew were simply going to be torn to pieces, but there was nothing that we could do about it because there was no sort of out for us. There was no way that we could kick somebody out of the contest, right? We had to accept all the contest entries. That's the way the legal rules were written. And part of being accepted in the contest entry meant that your photo went up on the Facebook album. So we did our best when the photo album went live, but at a certain point you have to stop moderating and go to sleep. So the next morning when I went into work, we had a couple of Facebook messages from some really, really hurt community members. And they were chastising us for not disabling the comments, for not doing a better job of protecting them and things like that. And to this day, it's the thing that I regret the most. But it's also the reason that I don't hesitate to remove any comment that in any way disparages one of our community members. And it's informed how we've approached moderation since, and the sensitivities inherent to handling user-generated content of any kind. Following that incident, we opted for a zero-tolerance policy with respect to the kinds of feedback that we would allow our community to give other community members. Under no circumstances are you allowed to use a person's race, ethnicity, gender, identity, sexual orientation, or other inherent trait as an insult on the Assassin's Creed social channels. And this is a policy that's strictly enforced by all of our social media operatives. A lot of communities will post these rules somewhere, but we just execute on them. Although I am sometimes a big fan of going ahead and replying to the comment with the reason that the comment was hidden or deleted, so it shows up in the person's notification feed. But as I said, I've been talking with a lot of cosplayers, and we'd been approached by some internal teams who wanted to work with Jessica Negri. Now, I'd had some misgivings about working with her because I wasn't sure that she put forth an image that was aligned with Assassin's Creed brand values. She had a tendency to show a lot of skin in her costumes, and I'll admit that I was personally uncomfortable with promoting that. So I put it to the cosplayers that I developed relationships with over Facebook chat, asking if they felt it was appropriate that we work with her. Their answer was a resounding and nearly unanimous yes. Because as they explained, you cosplay whatever you want, however you want. There were some issues in cosplay at the time where there was a discussion going on about, oh, is this okay to cosplay? Is that okay to cosplay? And the baseline ruling consensus for the community was, you know what, we should just not be concerned about it. We should, if you want to dress up as something, then you're going to go ahead and do it. And this actually highlights one of the more positive aspects, I think, of reaching out and being really involved with your community. Because, of course, as I polled the cosplayers, The information that they were giving me helped me be a better feminist in my own personal life and understand the kinds of things that I could do to support the people in my life that were important to me. And it was most definitely something that the Assassin's Creed brand stood for. I mean, the assassins in Assassin's Creed are all about freedom and liberty and forging your own path, right? So it made perfect sense to have her as a cosplayer on our pages. So we started working with Jessica, and that relationship worked out really well for us. I think at the time that we started working with her, she had 200,000 Facebook fans, and now she's up to well over 2 million. So we got into the habit of posting her photos. We invited her to the studio, and things were going really well. Of course, this is the part where I talk a little bit about confronting trolls. Because we were very focused on moderating anything that we posted with her in them. Anytime we posted an image of her, it drew a lot of comments, and some of them were really, really unacceptable. But as I'd said, we didn't have too much trouble with that because we just removed them. But there was one example from a ComDab we had at the time, a super talented guy named Parvez Laka. And he brought to my attention one comment, and somebody had posted this comment on our photo that said, "I bet you $10 she doesn't even play the games." And that struck us both because we'd literally just watched her destroy an Assassin's Creed 4 demo that a lot of journalists had struggled with. So not to mention, it smacked of that whole fake geek girl garbage that's not real. And it's certainly not welcome in our community. So we wanted to crush that sentiment immediately. And we wanted to make sure that we did it publicly so people would understand our stance on it, the Assassin's Creed stance on how we felt about people addressing Jessica in this way. So Parvez went ahead and responded as the Assassin's Creed page with, "Let's not make assumptions. Jessica knows the franchise better than you might think. We'll take your $10 in the form of a check. Please send to Ubisoft, care of Assassin's Creed." And I'm super proud of that we were able to make that communication because it was a very clear statement of how we felt about those comments at the time. I mean, here's the thing. As a community manager, I don't care what draws you to our brand. It just so happened that Jessica was intimately familiar with the games. But even if she just liked the way the outfits look, that would be totally fine. Like, I literally do not care what it is that draws you to the brand. Whichever way you choose to celebrate it is totally fine. You do not need to know every single thing about the Assassin's Creed lore in order to be a fan of it. That's the only barrier to entry as far as that we're concerned, is that you like it. And we'll never let someone step all over that like it's somehow unworthy or unwelcome. So in conclusion, to summarize the methodologies that I've tried to highlight with my sort of rambling reminiscence of the first couple of years that I was in Assassin's Creed ComDev. One, be present and responsive. Interact with your community, and don't be afraid to have genuine discussions with individuals, the individuals in it. You get back more than you put in, for sure. Treat it like a real relationship with a real person, because that's what it is. It's just with a lot more people than you're probably used to. And a lot more people than a lot of the people that you know are probably used to. And then two, you can viably support creativity by providing it with a platform for distribution on the internet. Exposure can be a valuable commodity if you are honest about the relationship and respect the time and effort that your community puts into user-generated content. And as a community manager, you're going to be the primary person to do that. We spend a lot of time working with cosplayers. And if I had a dime for every time somebody came to me and was just like, "Oh, hey, can we have a cosplayer make a costume for this next week?" No, you cannot. These costumes take a lot of time and effort. And because we understand that and are intimately familiar with our cosplayers, we can work to defend them in that regard. And three, defend vehemently your community's emotional safety to the best of your ability. Don't let weird trolls dominate the narrative. Step in and engage, not to win an argument, but to demonstrate, not to win an argument with a particular individual, but to demonstrate to your community how you expect them to behave amongst each other. You want to be the best example of how your community members should treat and interact with each other. Thanks very much for your time. I will now be absolutely delighted to accept questions, but I think I need to do that in the overflow room. Cool. And don't forget to go ahead and fill out that evaluation. Thanks very much.